Hello and welcome to the Sands of Time review channel. It is your host Sammy Thunder. I'm back at it again with another one of my Watch Express videos. I'm here with another Grand Seiko episode. It could be a rant. You never know what to expect from myself. Sometimes I like the Grand Seiko, sometimes I don't. But I'm going to be honest, it is about this new release, the SPG X353. I'm not a huge fan. It is a cool watch on its own. I can respect it, but there are some things that I'm very confused about from Grand Seiko marketing, and how they do things. Now, this is the SPG X353, a quartz watch that is 34 mils, that has an identical dial to the Grand Seiko Skyflake. As you can see, the dial itself is the same pattern, light blue, as the Skyflake with firmly blued second hand. It's cool, but it doesn't make sense based on what I've seen in the past. I understand it's a different dial, but just recently Grand Seiko released the SPGP017 and it's USD 3800, which is 5650 Australian dollars. This watch here is 5650 Australian dollars. It features the 9F 61 movement, so no date caliber, quartz movement, accurate to plus minus 10 seconds a day. That's fine. For 5650 on the strap, no bracelet option. Features the similar case to, let's say, some of the other Elegance line watches. But when I see a release like this, for example, for the exact same price, you're getting the stainless steel bracelet. You're getting a very nice case in the 44GS Heritage. You are getting the caliber 9F85. Yeah, it's rated to -5 to +5 seconds a year. Look, I don't really care, because at the end of the day, these 9F movements, regardless of whether it's the quote-unquote superior or the standard 9F, it is going to run fairly accurate. And I know people with the ±10 second per year rating, and they get, +2 seconds of deviation in the year. So for me, it doesn't really matter. But look, at the end of the day, you are getting a watch where you can actually see the display case back. Now, in my ownership of this watch, at the end of the day, I didn't really care much. It does look cool, but yeah, you realize that watches, you look at the dial, and yeah, you do get a cool dial. You are getting the dial that's similar to the embossing, pattern embossing that's done on the Spring and Winter. It's similar to it, I guess, or the Lion. Thermally blued second hand. Great watch. It's a limited edition. Look, at the end of the day, I don't really care about limited editions, but the whole point is, if you compare apples with apples, which is what I'm trying to do here, is this Grand Seiko, yes, it's not limited, being the exact same price as this 44GS, and arguably you are getting a better value. Doesn't make sense. This is a 34mm GS. Look, I do think it's a men's watch still, but females will, can opt for that 34 mils. Lightweight, the inferior water resistance. The 44GS case looks spectacular on a strap, and I used to own this watch. I really like it. But at the end of the day, Grand Seiko have just released a huge amount of blue dial watches in many variations. It just feels like Grand Seiko. It feels like Grand Seiko is like a drug where you take it in and then you got to get another dose. You're like, I'm done with this style. I'm done with this. They're just going to keep releasing iteration upon iteration of something. Something is out there. Nothing becomes special at some point. Whereas, let's say a brand like Omega, they release the very original of the watch, example Speedmaster, and then, they release 50 limited editions. But with Grand Seiko, I'm very confused with how they're doing things. It really is kind of, as an enthusiast, as a supporter of Grand Seiko, it does, I'll be honest, kind of bother me a bit. I'm just very confused at the moment, right? Maybe if this watch, it showed off the movement, which would be good on a 34mm, the case back would arguably cover more in visual aspects. If they can do something to justify this, at the end of the day, I can understand, but even the handset is very similar to the SPG P017. There's probably differences, but it's very hard to justify. Maybe they're charging the price on the boxed sapphire crystal. At the end of the day, I cannot actually, justify this. And for a few extra $1,000, you might as well get the Skyflake. I mean, at the end of the day, the Skyflake spring drive movement, thicker watch, I can understand that. But they've just given you the quartz variation of it. And this is the thing with Grand Seiko. You can always expect, there is an expectation. I'm not, they've released so many watches recently that, just wait and hold on until you genuinely find something you like, and then you strike, right? So that's kind of my philosophy with the brand, but it still just feels like a drug that you take and you need to go on to the next shot. You sell it, get another one, sell, get another, like especially with these Grand Seiko limited edition pieces. That's how it's feeling at this moment. And the funny thing is, I did sell the SBGP 017. It's an amazing watch. It's terrific. It's great on specs. It's amazing. And I'm literally talking down upon a new release and comparing it to this watch here and the value you get. But I didn't connect with the dial as much as I could. The 44GS case is extraordinary. This watch was so perfect I couldn't own it. That's let's be honest, that's probably the reason I've sold it. Right? You cannot keep this smudge free. You cannot keep it scratch free. It is so damn perfect. It's such a great watch. And at the end of the day, the movement you don't really look at, right? So that's kind of one of my fears if I ever got a very, very, very high-end watch that showed off the movement, because right now I'm not even looking at the movements on my higher-end watches right now. Like, it doesn't, even manual winds that cover the entire case back. So yeah, it does kind of, it's playing in my head. Maybe I'm a more sporty guy, and something like this is a bit too dressy for me, even though the 44GS case is aggressive and cool. I still do want a 44GS watch, but I think the watch I'm kind of leading towards is actually the Grand Seiko SBGJ 201. The SBGJ 201 is part of the Heritage line, and it's the Mount Aware. This watch here is the showcase. It is the thicker automatic high beat, but it has that Mount Aware pattern, which is I like naturally occurring patterns, or like not naturally occurring patterns. Sorry, I like patterns that are that make sense in watchmaking. With the other dials like the Grand Seiko Winter, Spring, I kind of realized that I'm not really a huge fan of those dials. I don't really see where the money is going. It's a great looking watch with an amazing dial, but when I see Guilloche, for example, I kind of understand that there's a guy who's struggled to go through that process. And for the Grand Seiko, the winter dial or the spring dial, and even the SBGP 017 Sea of Clouds, I just don't understand. Personally, probably is a lengthy process, but with Guilloche, for example, I can understand what's happening. It makes sense, and I kind of like traditional watchmaking. This ridge pattern is something that makes sense to me. It's more ordered. It's not as random as the embossed pattern that you get on the spring and winter, for example. So this is kind of a watch I am looking towards, maybe in the future getting. It is the thicker watch at 14 mils thick, but it looks phenomenal. I like the pronounced indices and handsets, the thickness. It's much more thicker than the Sea of Clouds, for example. Sea of Clouds is a bit more thinner, and that's something I realized. I preferred the Grand Seikos, which had the more plain dials, more traditional dials, like for example the SBGM 221 in the Elegance collection. I mean, the Elegance collection is great, and it's a simple dial, and yeah, this is exactly the watch I'm talking about. It's classic. It's a timeless Grand Seiko, and that's why I kind of appreciate it. It's beautiful. It is the Grand Seiko, the one Grand Seiko if you want to get you know, you close your eyes, you wanted to get a Grand Seiko, this is the one. And at the end of the day, I decided to keep this watch instead of the SBGP017 simply because I felt like it was timeless. I felt like I have a very strong connection to this watch, being my first kind of luxury purchase. It's great, right? And it's not doing anything fantastic. It's not one of those hyped up Grand Seiko models with amazing dials. With those pattern dials, or nature inspired dials, as they say. It's just the cream dial, that you'd get on, let's say, a Calatrava or one of, any other Patek Philippe with a cream dial. So at the moment, I'm very confused with Grand Seiko and where they're heading, and even this SBG W283, for example, if you want a manual wind example that you can probably wear at 37 mils, at least you can see the manual wind movement. You have feedback to the watch compared to the very thin quartz. I mean, just get this compared to this, new release, the XBG X253. So I'm very confused personally, where that money is. And look, I can still respect the watch for what it is. If you are a person that's into 34mm dress watch with reliability in the quartz movement, I'm all for it. But the Sea of Clouds being the exact same price, and even some of the other sports GMT quartz watches that offer, I'd say, more bang for buck, this new pricing personally doesn't make sense. And if it does, let me know down below in the comments. I'd like to know. I'd like to be educated from my viewers. So last thing I would say, thanks for watching. It's a Sands of Time. Peace.